despite the airline reporting lower profits. Comair is the local representative of British Airways and operates low-cost airline Kulula. In financial results until the end of June, Comair says that passenger volumes rose, income rose, other costs weighed though, meaning that net profit fell by 12% for the year to 193 million rand. Comair says the airline performed well in the context of a 27% weakening of the rand. That's incredible and just puts into perspective what we've seen over the last few months. The airline says there was a significant exchange rate loss of 74 million rand on the re-evaluation of a dollar loan on one aircraft. Well, earlier this year, Comair lost a legal bid to challenge the bank guarantees given by government to SAA. It's still in court with SAA to determine damages after the national carrier was found guilty of anti-competitive behaviour between 2000 and 2006. Well, we're now joined in studio by the CEO of Comair, Eric Venter. Thank you for joining us, Eric.
Thank you.
Can we start with SAA? When is that claim around damages expected to be finalised?
Well, the case has actually been running for 13 years now, which is rather dramatic. The court proceedings are completed, so now we're just waiting for the ruling to come out. And that's really up to the judge as to how long it takes to compile the ruling.
So we're not expecting another 13 years, though?
We certainly hope not. I've had enough of it.
Yeah,
I certainly hope this year, yes.
You, I understand, are wanting about 2 billion rand. SAA is saying it'll never go over 300 million. But either way, this will be a big injection for Comair.
It's a huge claim, and the damage over a 6-year period was substantial, and then of course the fact that it's taken so long to actually materialise and get to court means that interest has been building on it for such a long time as well. So yes, you know, the base claim is around 850, 900, and the interest could equate to that as well.
You were contending SAA on two different fronts. Have you given up fighting the government guarantees, especially we just saw the finance minister talking about the recent one that has been granted just days ago?
Look, in principle, we obviously still think it's quite an anti-competitive effect, not in terms of competition legislation, but in terms of the effect on the market. And the fact that it basically gives a lot of immunity from the consequences of non-commercial behaviour by SAA. So we are encouraged by the new board that's been put in place. We hope that a competent management team gets put in place, and consequently that the guarantees are effectively utilised and they don't just become a mechanism to protect SAA from its own conduct. So we are encouraged by what we're seeing to date. I think there's a huge challenge still in terms of implementing a good management team in SAA. And you know, if there's a real turnaround plan, if it's adhered to, and if the funding is used appropriately to actually assist SAA in a turnaround, then we're not opposed to it. The issue really has been in the past that it hasn't been appropriately applied to put to good use within the airline. And so, well, at the moment, we'll see where it goes. We're not going to take any action right now. But look, if we see that it just becomes another crutch to lean on in terms of anti-competitive conduct, then we'll have to attack it again and deal with it again.
Dudu Myeni was mentioned a lot today. She did speak to SABC, I think, last week, and she said those guarantees have never been materialised. Well, she said there's never been actual cash handed over. I guess those guarantees have not been called upon. In her view, does that make any difference to you?
Well, I mean, the banks have certainly been lending money against the guarantees. So the guarantees have been utilised for SAA to obtain cash. The real question at the end of the day is whether SAA can actually repay all those loans, or whether the government ends up having to repay the loans to the banks. If it gets to the point where government has to repay the loans to the banks, then it's the same as if the money came straight out of the taxpayer budget, out of the parliamentary budget. As
some of those MPs were pointing out. Okay, let's look at your results. Passenger volumes went up, but your revenue in South Africa actually declined. Does that mean in English you basically had to reduce the price of tickets?
Well, the price of tickets has come down quite dramatically. There's just far too much capacity in the market at the moment, particularly in conjunction with the fairly weak economy. The capacity that's been added into the market isn't being taken up by the market because the economy is not strong enough to take up that capacity. And so we've ended up with quite an aggressive price war, particularly between the low-cost carriers, to try and hang on to and obtain passengers, to stay sustainable. The whole approach at the moment isn't really sustainable in totality because the revenue in the market's actually declining. So, one can't just keep discounting and hope that eventually somehow you're going to work your way out of this thing. So either the airfares are going to have to increase, or we're going to probably see a reduction in capacity possibly departure of an airline or somebody pulling back on capacity, etc. Just through basic economics, we have to get the balance of supply and demand back into the right proportion again.
What you're saying is very sad, because the idea was that people who could not afford flights would eventually start flying, and there's this huge burgeoning middle class. So you're saying that's not happening because we don't have growth? We
just don't have growth. Ultimately, it's a middle class product. Flying is a middle class product, and if you look at all the statistics globally around growth forecasts for aviation, it's all focused on middle class growth around the world. And we're just not seeing sufficient middle class growth in South Africa to actually achieve that. It's, at the end of the day, it's not a cheap product. The truth of the matter is aviation costs are incredibly high. We're bringing in new aircraft because the operating efficiencies are there, but each aircraft is costing $45 million. Now at 15 Rand to the dollar, that alone, that movement from around 10, 11 Rand to the dollar to 15 Rand to the dollar alone has been a massive impact on Comair. And so it has a huge impact on affordability again. So the economy as a whole, the exchange rate, the poor growth in the economy, the massive increase in the cost of fuel due to the exchange rate, even though oil prices come down, all of those factors are making it actually very expensive to operate an airline, and yet at the same time they're making it unaffordable for the market to buy airline tickets. So we are seeing this clash of two negative factors in terms of affordability from the passenger perspective and the costs driving up from the weak economy and exchange rate perspective. Which don't come together to create a good environment for aviation.
So it's not necessarily good news for consumers. We want prices to go down, of course.
They won't be going down any further.
But if more people fall off the market, like you say, then there's less competition in future.
I think there's always been quite aggressive competition. Even when we had a few years back, we had the demise of One Time and Velvet Sky, and at that point in time, it was really Comair with Kulula and British Airways brand, and the state-owned carriers, particularly Mango and SAA. And we still had a very strong competition in that market. You could see the profit margins didn't grow very much, but the margins were there for reinvestment. So it's a balancing act, I think. One has to look carefully at what point excessive capacity in the market actually damages the market in its entirety.
Eric, final question. You do suggest that your results would have been much better if it were not for a few factors, the Rand, but is this not our own goal? 74 million Rand lost on one aircraft that was loaned in dollars. There's also talk of hedging. Was this all handled correctly and unavoidable?
Well, at the end, the order that we worked with was 8 aircraft. We funded 1 in dollars and 7 in rands. Now, obviously, the interest rate on the dollar loans are negligible. I mean, we were getting interest at 2.5% odd, which is quite phenomenal. And those deals were done in 2010, 2011. So, yes, the balance was probably right. We're fortunate we didn't go 50-50 dollar rand. The fact we did 1 in dollars and 7 in rands is probably a good sign at the end of the day. But yes, it would have been great if we'd done all 7 in rands, all 8 in rands in hindsight. But that's the kind of thing that you got to weigh up the risks, and I think fortunately we probably did weigh the risks adequately in favour of rand funding. But it's still, at the end of the day, yes, you take a big hit when the rand collapses, just on the loans on one aeroplane, and that just again highlights the cost of the capital investment in the industry. But hopefully, I think that we've taken the worst of it. I don't think we're going to necessarily see another collapse of the rand to that extent in the year ahead. So hopefully we start the year 70 million ahead for next year. And also the hedges have all run out on the oil, so that's another 70 million that we shouldn't reoccur again.
So you're looking to a better future. We have to end it there, but thank you for your time this evening. CEO of Comair, Eric Venter, and I will be back with your headlines in Prime in just a bit.